right-hand corner. It is in moderated mode so that only we can see your questions, just to protect your privacy. The event board in the top right hand of the screen is where you can get dialing in instructions and access the slides from today's presentation. A quick note, if you're not using Google Chrome and you're experiencing audio issues, we have found that Google Chrome is the best browser to run this in, or you can try dialing in. Within 24 hours, you will receive a follow-up email linking to the recording and the slides from today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to marketing@threadhcm.com. The last thing I'm going to say is I am expecting some packages today, and I do have dogs, so please give us grace if you hear any background noise that should not be there. With that, I will turn it on over to Lori Winters, our CEO.
Good morning, everybody. Lori Winters. This is our Thread Connect Town Hall on June 4th, and hopefully we are going to give some much needed guidance on this crazy time that we're living in. Before I go into some of the changes and some of the things that have just happened, I want to just give a little bit of a background. We're going to talk about the HR 7010 changes that just happened. We'll spend most of our time on that, and I'm going to turn it over to Scott, who is our Chief HR Officer, who also manages and runs our HR outsourcing division. And he's going to do a quick update on a few things. And then we're going to open it up. This has been the most important part, is opening it up to Q&A that you guys have. So obviously, this is our little disclaimer. Basically, we're going to, the guidance on this stuff keeps changing, and we are here to provide our interpretation in as much valid content as we have as of right now. And it is subject to change. Always consult your other professionals in accounting or legal just to make sure you're, doing everything right. So just real quickly, we've tried to navigate this crazy time for everybody by providing the guidance as we knew it. We've spent a lot of time trying to understand the guidance, and it keeps changing as it's changed for all of us here. So we just continue to provide the latest guidance and changes as they occur. The loan application process and forgiveness application, all the previous town halls and webinars we've done are available on our website at threadhcm.com. You can click on resources, and then there's a section on the webinar. So you can go see any of the previous webinars that we've done. Many companies, just quickly, many companies have received their PPP funds. They're getting close to the original 8 weeks. So we're going to address what's happening with those. There's still money available. So if those of you have not applied for these funds, a lot of the money, there's some money still sitting out there. You have until June 30th. To still apply. So if you have not applied, you can still do so. So now, without further ado, let's get to some of the changes. Yesterday, I chatted my leadership team and I said, I just sat through on C-SPAN watching the Senate last night at 6, or I started at 4:30, because I was hoping to get a final update for you guys today. And I said it was just like watching paint dry. So this is a GIF that was sent to me by one of my teammates. And it's actually a watching paint dry GIF. So that is exactly what it was. If you've never watched the Senate or House in action, it is not very fun. But I did watch it. And I am prepared today to tell you exactly what was passed. So as you know, you may or may not know, this new it's called the PPP Loan Extension Act or something like that, but otherwise known as HR 7010. The House passed it earlier, and I was prepared to do this saying what the proposed changes were, but I watched the Senate last night pass it at the very last minute. So they did pass it last night at 6:30 p.m. And so now it is going to go to the president's desk for signature and will become law very shortly. So this is going to provide, the new legislation is going to make sure forgiveness is much easier to come by. Yeah, and I don't know why, Barb, but you're in the limelight there, and I can't get myself in there.
I know.
I don't know how to fix that. So I apologize. Barb is going to have to sit there with a smile on her face. This has happened a couple of times. Not sure why. So I'm going to stay in the little box in the right-hand corner. Sorry about that, Barb. Just smile, wave. So it gives us 5 different ways to make sure forgiveness is easier to come by. There's an extension to the covered period, which we'll go over. There's an expansion of the percentage paid for non-payroll expenses. Extension to the FTE restoration. There's an extension to the loan payback time period. And there's some exemptions for hiring issues, which is really interesting. I've had a lot of questions around that. And then there's an extension to the tax deferral. Barb, somebody's saying you can leave your seat. I don't know if that would make any difference. We'll just keep moving. And if you can figure it out, go ahead. If not, I apologize, guys, that you're not seeing me in the big screen, but you're probably not, you're not missing out on too much. So first thing, okay, there's an extension to the covered period. We all know that the 8 weeks was the magic number originally, and now the covered period has extended to 24 weeks. So you have 24 weeks to spend the funds to still qualify for forgiveness. This is great news for those companies that have been fully shut down. I think of hospitality, restaurants, companies that really were not able to spend the money in those 8 weeks. So now you have 24 weeks to spend the money. So we're also thinking that we're assuming that the $100,000 cap would mean that now you have up to $46,154 per employee, but this has not been spelled out yet. So we're waiting on new guidance to be released at some point. There's an extension of the percentage that you can spend on non-payroll expenses. So they've reduced the amount originally. There I am. The original cap was that you could spend up to 25% on other expenses, other eligible expenses, but now they have changed that to 60% being spent on payroll expenses and up to 40% you can spend on the other eligible expenses. So that the 40% can be spent on the qualified non-payroll expenses such as rent, mortgage interest, and utilities. So far, they have not added any additional expenses, and I know that some companies have other big expenses they'd love to be able to spend that on, but right now they have not changed that. They've just added that you can spend up to 40% on those items and at least 60% on payroll. There is an important note that I read on this that so far it looks like you must spend at least 60% on payroll or none of it will be forgiven. I know there's some pressure to change that, but right now, just be really careful, because originally, if you spent less than 75% on payroll, it was okay. You would get a percentage of the forgiveness knocked down or reduced, but you would still get some of it forgiven. The way it reads right now is you have to spend at least 60% on payroll or none of it would be forgiven. Like I said, there's some pressure to change that. So we'll see what happens when there's going to be more guidance that's going to come after this thing has now been passed. This is big. There's an extension to the restoration of full-time equivalents. So a lot of people were getting stressed about the fact that they had to have the same number of full-time equivalents by June 30th. If you're a restaurant, for instance, and you've been shut down and you're still not even up to full capacity, how were you going to be able to do that? So this extends the full-time equivalent safe harbor to the end of the year. So December 31st. Now you have to be able to restore your full-time equivalents by December 31st. So that is huge. It's going to give you more time to be able to do that, especially if you were shut down partially or fully during this time. So I think, the goal for all of this is to provide as much opportunity to get this whole thing forgiven. And that is what we're trying to do to help our clients and our prospects figure out how to get the most out of this. All right, this is a little bit of a unique nuance here, is that if you have anything left as a loan, they've changed the payback from 2 years to 5 years for the amount that's not forgiven. But the language in there right now states that this is for loans that were applied for or funded after the date that this extension becomes law. Now, so the rest of these are retroactive. The only one that is not currently retroactive is the payback time. But they did put language in there to allow the borrower and lender to negotiate new terms. So if you end up with an amount that's not forgiven, that will become a loan, and you want to move that from 2 to 5 years, and you already got your money previous to this new law, then you need to talk to your borrower, unless this gets changed. As of right now, this is the way it's written. And so just be careful with that. Make sure you talk to your lender about that. This is really, we've gotten a lot of questions on this. Right now, there are issues with people being able to get their full-time equivalent people back for multiple reasons. Either they can't find new hires, they can't find people that want to come back to work, they can't find people to take the jobs. So this is a huge piece that they just passed in there, which is an exemption for certain things. So it's a new way for borrowers who lose their full-time equivalents during the period from February 15th through the end of the year. The amount of forgiveness will not be reduced if you are able to document the following. One is, and there's a lot of room for interpretation here, so I'm sure there'll be more guidance, but here are the items. Inability to rehire individuals who were employed on as of February 15th, 2020. So inability to rehire them. They don't want to come back to work, for instance. Inability, or it could be that you weren't able to rehire them because you didn't have the revenue and the jobs to do. Inability to hire similarly qualified employees for unfilled positions on or before December 31st, 2020. We've had so many questions about this. What if I can't find people? What if I can't hire them fast enough? So it's addressing this here. The question will be, the question is going to be how you're going to be able to document that. So, more guidance, I believe, will come out on how you are going to have to document that. If you're unable to return to the same level of business as previous to February 15th due to compliance with CDC guidelines, et cetera. So there's a lot of things right now. If you're a restaurant and you've opened back up, but you have to be at 50% or 25% capacity, then how can you hire everybody back? So there is now this caveat that says, if you are unable to return to the same level of business as of the end of the year, you will not have to have that amount of your forgiveness reduced. So get ready for more guidance, because there's a lot of room for interpretation. And how are you going to prove this? We'll find out. But I believe the spirit of the PPP at this point is they're trying to find every way possible for most companies to get a full forgiveness. So this is going to give us so much more flexibility on timing, on the FTEs, on hiring people back. And then if you're a company that has been shut down fully, partially, and you're not able to get back to the level of business that you were at, you're going to have a lot of room for flexibility here on the FTE number. There's a little bit of icing on the cake too. We let everybody know that the tax deferral for the federal Social Security employer tax of 6.2%. Originally, if you got the PPP loan, you could not defer the taxes. Then they changed it to you could defer those taxes, but only up until you got a forgiveness figure from your lender. Now they have changed that. So if you're a PPP loan recipient, even if you get the full thing forgiven, you can now defer that 6.2 employer Social Security tax through the end of 2020. So there's no deadline. You can now defer it through the end of the year. 50% of that will be due at the end of 2021, 50% at the end of 2022. So that's a big deal too. That's, a decent amount of money for a lot of companies. The only thing that I would caution is that, if you do this, right now cash is king. If businesses have been affected, or most businesses have been affected, cash is so important. So I see, do this if you need to, but just make sure you're prepared to fund it when it's due. So the 50% end of 2021 and 50% end of 2022, make sure you're ready to fund that when it's due, because tax penalties, as some of you may know, are very stiff. So that is kind of icing on the cake. Some items to think about with all this. So, and again, I watched the Senate approve this. I read the whole the HR 7010 bill. I've read the whole thing. There's still a lot of questions because, we're going to need more guidance that will come out from this. But I got as much of it as I possibly could and read as much as I could, read all of it. So here are some things to think about though. You're not required to wait the 24-week period. If you have spent all the money and in those 8 weeks and you feel that you can get 100% forgiveness now, you can go ahead and apply for forgiveness if you want to. So you're not prevented from doing that. Even if you want to stick to the 8 weeks though, I would say don't rush the forgiveness application. And here's why. Originally when the 8 weeks was up, lenders were going to be inundated with these applications. And so I spoke to a CEO of one of the lenders and he said that, they were going to have to figure out how they were going to even handle all of these forgiveness applications. So even if you're going to stick with the 8 weeks, don't rush, take a breath, and just make sure that you're going to get 100% of this forgiven. So there's no rush for that. I've been trying to find what the deadline is for submitting the application. Even previous with the 8 weeks, when the 8 weeks was in place, it's fairly unclear other than the top of the application says that the expiration date is October 31st, 2020. So actually, I think you have a good bit of time. If you're going to choose the 24 weeks, this whole thing is going to push out as far as you're going to have until the end of the year to restore full-time equivalent employees. And so this is going to push out to next year to being even needing to apply for forgiveness. So just, know that you've got a good bit of time to get this stuff done. It's great news. I mean, so many companies have been struggling with figuring out how they were going to do this. And I just think it's so great for the companies out there that needed that. So some questions right now that I still have, and I'm sure as I think through this, I'll have more and more. But based on current guidance, there are still questions that remain for me. And one is, we presume that the cash compensation limit to an employee will increase so if it's $100,000 annual employee, we're assuming that's an equivalent for 8 weeks of $15,385. But it's an equivalent of 24 weeks of $46,153. So we're presuming that, but is that the case? There has not been guidance issued on that yet. If the above is true, there's been some caveats around owner employee amount. So owner employees as of right now are still capped at that 100,000, but they still will get forgiveness up to that 100,000 prorated. So will that apply to owner employees as well if it goes up to the 46,000 number? How does this affect self-employed and sole proprietorships? So self-employed sole proprietorships are able to apply for PPP funding. How is this going to affect them? There's no real guidance in that yet. I assume there will be guidance coming. When will the application be due? And if it's not due until next year, how does that affect our 2020 tax returns? Since the IRS has stated that the forgiven amounts cannot be deducted. So there's going to be a lot of questions. That's going to be a good question to talk to your CPAs. I feel bad for them right now trying to figure all this out, just like we're having to figure out the payroll side of this fun stuff. But there's some questions around what's going to happen with the 2020 tax returns. That's going to be a challenge. So obviously, like I said, more guidance is expected on this, but great news. I'm excited to bring this info to you guys, and I hope that this is going to help everybody here get 100% forgiveness. And we're going to answer questions shortly on all of this as we get to it. Lastly, the last thing I'm going to say right now is, if you're a client of ours, iSolved does have a report called the CARES PPP Forgiveness Report. If you are a company that is ready to still go through your application process, the report is available. It is not yet live to everyone. So make sure that if you're one that is just wanting to jump on this, you're going to stick with your 8 weeks, you feel good about it, and you want to submit it, ask your account manager if you need it, and you can get access to that report. At the bottom of the report, there's a tab for each section on the application. So it's going to be fairly easy to help you fill out what you need. If you're using our benefit administration system, those costs will also be included in that report. If not, you'll have to get that data somewhere else. I again recommend that you don't apply for this yet unless you're 100% sure of 100% forgiveness. There's so much flexibility there now that it would be a shame to not get 100% of this forgiven. So with that, I am going to, before we start answering the questions, I'm going to turn this over to Scott for a few minutes, and he's going to give a couple updates on the HR side of things, and then we'll go to your questions. So Scott?
All right. Thank you, Lori. I hope everybody's doing okay today. We'll see if Lori stays on the screen the whole time or not. Oh, there I am. All right. My big melon. I know there's a lot going on in the world right now, and we just decided, just for today, we're going to kind of focus on a little bit of positivity. And I'm talking to clients and other folks every day, all day right now for the past few months. So I kind of hear themes of questions over time, and it's interesting to see how that tide rolls from week to week. And I know that there are plenty of companies who are still out of business or still really struggling to think about how they're going to make it through this and get back. There are some who are trying to come back right now, trying to hire people. So it's really a wide range of what's going on with the people that I talk to every single day. There's a FedEx truck pulling up in my cul-de-sac, so I'll warn everybody in case the dogs come running in. But one of the things I think it's important to think about right now is working on the business, right? And some of you may say, what, are you crazy? I've got too much going on to think about this, but I think it's a good time to think about it. Is how do we keep our current culture alive? And if you go, you know what, I'm not even sure exactly what my current culture is anymore, then maybe this is an opportunity to go, what do I want it to be? Ideally, what do I want my company culture to be? When I bring people back, when we start to grow, when we have business again, what kind of values do we want to have in place, right? So in terms of how do we keep our culture in place, there's a few things to think about. One is starting with knowing what you want it to be and defining it. And simpler is better. You don't want 30 core values because that's pretty hard to live up to, right? If you can have, 5 or 10 or less, that's good. So you define your culture, make sure everybody knows exactly what your values are. What are your non-negotiables? What do you want the personality of your business to be, right? And you decide what you want that to be, and you hire for that. So you want to hire people who embody the values that you have defined for your company. You want to make sure that you continue to keep leadership a priority, because anytime when you're in a situation like this where there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of unknowns, you want to make sure that you're providing some confidence for your team by saying, if nothing else, here's what I'm doing to react. Here's what I'm doing to be proactive. Here's how we're cutting expenses. Here's what we're doing with the loan. Here are the resources we're talking to. Just be transparent with them about what you're doing so they see the effort a little bit. So when you're talking about your culture, you want to also make sure you build some accountability into your culture. And I've listed a few things in here, like, performance management is a little farther down the list there. But in terms of your culture, you want to talk about your values and you want to hire for those values, but you also want to talk about performance and expectations, because you are in business. People do need to perform. You have to be able to measure somehow how people are performing. And when everybody's working remotely, you don't see the effort. You don't have the benefit of seeing people giving it everything they've got on the phone or in front of customers or in the warehouse or, in the restaurant, whatever it is. You might not get to see some of that right now. So you have to think in terms of what are the deliverables? What are the final metrics? How do we measure success in your job? And there's nothing wrong with asking your employees, hey, we got time to think through this a little bit. If you were me, how would you measure success in your job? What feels like success for you, right? And then you can work on that together and develop it and come up with 2 or 3 things that you think are realistic, and you can adjust them as you go. Nothing wrong with being fluid with that. So in terms of onboarding, one thing that I've heard a lot is I wish we had a better onboarding program. I wish we had a better orientation program. And almost every company I have ever worked with says that. That's a universal thing. So this is an opportunity to say, you know what, we have a lot of people out. We're going to be onboarding people eventually. What do we want that experience to be? How would we want it to be better or different? Where is it lacking? And take steps to do that. So I'm helping some of our clients work through these things right now. Would love to help you with those as well. It's a great way to stand out and to get people feeling like they made a great decision when they join your company. A small example of that would be, can we take a little short summary video of our employee handbook and our history and what we're about and pop that into our digital onboarding? So we just send a link to employees. They click the link, they sign all their new hire forms, but they also get to watch this little video instead of reading a 50-page employee handbook. They can watch a summary of it. Then you can set up a learning management program where you assign that video if you wanted to current employees and even attach a quiz to it if you want, or you could do that for all new employees as well. So think in terms of what could we do differently? What could we do better? What would I feel proud of? In terms of your onboarding, you want to continue to communicate as much as you can with your employees, mix it up, some video calls, some old school phone calls. Nothing wrong with sitting in a parking lot, a lawn chair, and having a coffee across from somebody, whatever it takes to keep that communication up and let people feel like they're still in touch. And then, take advantage of the tools you have. I mean, at Thread, we have our performance management tools and our learning management tools where you can assign and track and set auto reminders. Same with performance management, all in our iSolved system. So we take advantage of all those tools to automate and make things easier for our clients, and they seem to really appreciate that and enjoy it. So what are some basic opportunities for improvement here? Well, I think in terms of how you define yourself, how you communicate to your employees is really important. How you hire and onboard, how you give feedback, how you measure that feedback, all of those things are worth looking at and talking about right now because you have a chance to change them if you want going forward. Another thing I just want to mention before I wrap this part up is because so many people are dealing with anxiety right now, not just with work, but with family, being at home, it's just everything is different right now. If you have an employee assistance program, it's important to share that information with your employees. Make sure they know the phone number, the website, the login. Make sure they understand what it's for and that there are different things you can call in or talk to counselors for. Make sure they understand that it's confidential. If you don't have an employee assistance program, which is basically a confidential counseling program, I would encourage you to do that. They're not expensive. Sometimes they can be included with your benefit offerings if you talk to your broker, or you can purchase them. And typically they'll cover your employees and the employee's family as well for several free counseling sessions. And that's a great benefit to have right now that's not real expensive that could really help your team. So I will move on. I just want to remind you real quick that Barb will be sending out a follow-up email after this, and you will have a link in your email to schedule some time on my calendar. If you want to talk through any of the topics that I just mentioned or any of the other HR issues that you're dealing with, furloughs, layoffs, rehires, unemployment claims, and discrimination, diversity, all of the things that people are calling me about right now, feel free to call me. I'd love to talk to you, and you can schedule time on my calendar to do that. So Thread Engage is the name of our HR service. And I do believe that right now HR support is more important than ever. I've talked to a handful of companies who have said, I'm going to wait till all this is over, and then I definitely want to work with some HR support teams like yourselves. But I would challenge that. I think it might even be better to start with that now. And I'm not saying that to sell services. I'm saying it because I know what's ahead, and there's a lot of HR work to be done. And it would be helpful to have somebody on your team who can help you as a valuable resource there. So we're here for you. Hit any of our town halls that are previously recorded in our webinars. They're on our website, threadhcm.com. And then feel free to schedule time with me on the calendar. Okay. Ready to get into some questions?
All right. So I am going to go through the moderated questions real quick because And then we'll this is very different. Usually we would hit the questions that were submitted first, because I feel like I'm very appreciative of people going through the time to think about those. There are a lot of questions that were submitted that are not really as valid right now due to the changes. So I want to hit the moderated questions first, and then we'll go to the submitted questions, and hopefully we'll get to all of them. We will stay on here and answer as many as possible for those, and for those of you that have questions. And for those of you that didn't, you may want to listen to see what questions others had. So the first question I see here is about extra service pay, hazard pay bonuses. You definitely can, that is included. Any amount of pay that is normal that you would pay an employee, hazard pay, bonuses, or anything like that, as long as you stay within that $100,000 threshold, that is fine. Let's see. Can you request more money since the time period has been extended? As of right now, no. They have not said anything about being able to request more money. You know, there is still some money sitting out there, so maybe they will do that. But as of right now, they have not. The whole purpose of this extension is to use the money that you got for companies that were having a hard time being able to pay people because they were partially shut down. Will we get a copy of this after the call? Definitely. We always send out a copy of the slides and the video, or the recording. Has the 56-day been extended? Yes, it definitely has been. It is now 24 weeks if you want it to be. I read that it was either 8 weeks or 24. What happens if you have used all the funds in, say, 13 weeks? Do you have to wait 24 weeks to file? And I don't think that's the case. They really have not specified, other than they just give you a longer period of time to spend the money, and you can probably file for the forgiveness whenever you want to after that, but you're going to have some time. You're going to have time to be able to fill it out, make sure you're going to get 100% forgiveness, and you can get it into your lender, I'm sure, whenever you're ready. Was there anything in the bill about deductibility or taxability of forgiveness? Nothing different. As of right now, the forgiven amount will not be taxable income, but your expenses that you use the forgiven amount on will also not be deductible. So nothing has changed so far on that. Let's see. What about the employees that did, let's see. Oh, what about employees? What did the guidance say? Now that we use the funds that maybe we could have used to get through the 24-week period, is there any additional guidance on that? That's a good question. If you already hired people back just to be able to pay them to use the money, and now you've got 24 weeks, as of right now, there's no new guidance on that. Is it safer to show more payroll or other expenses than required for forgiveness? So wait for an additional pay period, submit 10 weeks. Well, now you've got 24 weeks, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. But the more you spend on payroll, probably the better. And now you've got 24 weeks to spend it. Okay, this is a good one. What if we brought back people during this time per the SBA requirements, but we still do not have enough business to justify our current level of staffing? Can we lay off again? We do believe we'd be back at FTE levels by the end of the year. So the way I read it, and again, this is how I read it, since it just got voted on and passed yesterday, there's going to be more guidance that comes out over time, as we've seen in the past. The way I read this, though, is now you have plenty of time to fulfill or to restore your FTE count to the end of the year. So if you needed to do that, and then you restore them, as long as you restore them by the end of the year, that's the way I'm reading it, should be fine. Are you only able to submit 8 weeks of expense despite the expanded timeline, or can you submit more than 8 weeks of expenses? You can definitely submit more than 8 weeks of expenses. So now you're going to have 24 weeks to spend that money. So it could be, now you have additional months of rent, additional months of payroll. So as long as you get that 100% forgiveness, you'll be fine. Can you submit using 10 or 12 weeks of payroll? And yes, you could submit using however many you want. I just wouldn't jump the gun on trying to get the the forgiveness application submitted until you know for a fact that you've got 100% forgiveness, because with all this flexibility, it should be pretty easy to get almost everybody to 100%. Let's see. Would monthly commissions bonuses be added to salary and then averaged to compare to the cap? Well, you can include commissions, bonuses, hazard pay, anything you want. You just have to make sure that you don't go over the 100,000 payroll amount that is calculated over that time period. The question that I have is, I'm assuming that now you will be able to spend more than the 15,000 per person, but they have not made any, given any guidance on that. But I think that will be one of the first things that they will send out. So I'm hoping that that will not be capped, that it will be capped at 100,000, but over a 24-week period, which is more like 46,000 as opposed to the 8-week period. Do you expect that lenders will actually accept the current forgiveness application form? I do believe that they will, if you are, because what I read was that the 8 weeks, if you choose to stick with the 8 weeks time period, you can, and that would be the original application form. It will depend on the lenders, though. So I think, in that case, you've got to speak with the lenders. I don't know that they've gotten all the guidance from this. Like I said, it was just passed. So did they get full guidance on what they are able to do? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that yet. Let's see. If we extend our time to the 24 weeks, do we have to keep all of the FTE that we brought back, or can we reduce staff due to much lower revenue? I do think that based on that hiring, the exceptions, the FTE exceptions, if your revenue is down because of CDC related guidelines or local law, legal guidelines where you're not allowed to open up 100%. I think based on what I've read, there's a lot of flexibility about not having to hit that FTE number due to reduced business. So it's very vague. There's going to be more guidance around that coming, but I think that you're going to have a lot of opportunity to work within that, so that you won't have to have the same number of FTEs that you had when you were at 100% capacity. Scott, I'm going to hand this to you real quick. If an employee is termed for cause, what documentation is required so that the employee will not count against FTE? What is your thought on that?
Well, I think you document the way you normally would document a termination. So if you have a separation notice or a termination letter, or even if you just keep a record in your payroll system why someone was terminated for cause, it depends on, each company's different, but as long as you have documentation just like you normally would, if you normally document things, a lot of companies don't, and I encourage you to document things. So keep a letter like that. If you have somebody who quits or refuses to come back to work, make sure you get their resignation in writing, even if it's an email, it's fine. Or send a recall letter to people who have been furloughed or temporarily laid off, and include in that recall letter the option for them to accept or decline the offer. And if they decline, then you just keep that in their file to show that you made the offer. And we have samples of those on our website and in previous town halls as well, and we'd be glad to share those with you. But yeah, think of it as, what kind of documentation do I need? The documentation you would normally need is what you would need here.
Right. There was one that I read. Let's see. Are the performance management tools in iSolved available to employers with as few as 50 employees? Yes, they are. There's two types of performance management tools that we have. One is a fairly basic performance management system within iSolved. And that's, if you use a paper system or a simple performance management system, it's a great way to automate that. And then there's the next level up, which is called Mojo, and it is a much higher level performance management system. Okay. Since the forgiveness rules have changed, has the PPP application for forgiveness been updated? As of right now, no, but it will have to be. They're going to have to update that. So I think that will be coming. This is a good question. How can you file early if the rehiring of FTE is through 12/31? Good question. I don't have an answer to that. We're going to have until the end of the year now if we choose the 24 weeks. If you stick with the 8 weeks, you could file. If you are going to go with the 24 weeks, and it's going to ask you, have you rehired through 12/31 to hit your FTE number? The only way that I would think that you could file early and not worry about that is if you already have your FTE number restored, or you never went down in FTE count. So if you just kept the same amount of people, your revenue went down, but your FTE count stayed the same, you may be able to file that earlier, but who knows? That I would talk to your lender about. If our revenue doesn't support bringing back everyone by the end of the year, will our funds still be forgiven? I think there's a good little section in that's, like I said, is still very vague, but there's a lot of room for that to be the case in the exemptions, the FTE exemptions now. That is about if your company has not been able to restore itself back to pre-February 15th revenue numbers due to partial or full shutdown, how are you going to be able to document that? Who knows? It could just be that it's going to be a good faith certification, but I think there's a good amount of room in there now. The goal is to get as much forgiven for most companies as possible, especially those that have been affected so negatively. So if revenue has been hit and you're not able to get to that same level through the end of the year, I think you're going to have a good amount of ability to stay below that FTE count and be okay. So there's a whole section on that. It's still very vague, and I do expect more guidance to come out. If you receive the $10,000 disaster grant, is that amount still deducted from the PPP? As of right now, yes, it's still going to be deducted. So that $10,000 would be deducted from the forgiveness amount. That, who knows if that changes. As of right now, it's the same. If I gave an employee a raise after I received the PPP loan, is the amount of the raise covered in the forgiveness? That's fine, as long as you don't go over the $10,000 or the $100,000 annualized threshold. Let's see. In terms of payroll reporting, can we request forgiveness for base salary and exclude commissions bonus to keep within the $100,000 cap? I think the main thing is you just can't pay them more than the annualized rate of $100,000. It doesn't matter what is included in that. It's just don't go above that amount. So I think that is fine. Doesn't matter. You just can't go above that amount. So in other words, each employee has a max that you're allowed to pay them. And will that amount go up with the new 24 weeks? That's the big question, I would assume, but we'll see what happens. So Barb, do you want to read some of the the earlier submitted questions?
Let's see.
Go ahead.
Yeah. This one says, can you explain the new 24-week period to restore their workforce levels and wages to the pre-pandemic levels required for full forgiveness? Explain specifically how this will work.
I think we pretty much already covered that one. That was we covered that.
Does the max of $15,384 per person go up?
Yeah, we covered that. That's what we were just talking about. Not sure. We were hoping, but they've not really explained that in that kind of detail yet.
What about if our loan is forgiven as of July 1st, the original 8-week period, can you do layoffs after that?
If the loan amount was forgiven, well, you're not going to get an answer on forgiveness for a while. My guess is it's going to take months to get an answer on forgiveness. But again, if you've spent the money, you're doing layoffs, and you're going with the new 24-week time period, you just need to make sure that you've got the FTE count restored by the end of the year.
Okay. Mike asks, I can't find anybody to hire. No one's applying. We have government rules on who is eligible for us to hire, and so far no one's applied, and only half have returned since the PPP.
Yeah, I think that one has been addressed now. That that is again in that exemption, FTE exemption ruling, which is you have the ability to now reduce your or not to have the forgiveness reduced based on not being able to hire people. So if you're trying to hire people and you can't find them, that is specifically spelled out, because a lot of companies were having that problem. Whether they can't find people to take the jobs, they're currently on unemployment and they can't find people to come back. They have definitely addressed that. So I think that is going to be in your benefit now.
Okay, one more. Delyn asks, I didn't set up a Scepter account for my utilities and payroll during this time period. Is that going to be a problem?
That is not a problem. So I did recommend out of the gate that we move money to a separate payroll or separate account, but that was just for accounting purposes, because I think at the end of the day, this is an accounting exercise. You just are going to want to be able to prove what you spent the money on. So you'll need a combination of payroll reports, utility reports, rent, lease, mortgage interest statements. And so as long as you have that documentation, then it's okay that you didn't put it in a separate account. There are a lot of people did not. Let's see. I'm going to look and see. There was another one. With the extension, how is the FTE count comparison changed? Is it employees at 215 compared to the number of covered weeks I choose, or 215 compared to 24 weeks after I receive the loan? That is a very good question. They made it very specific, as we know, in the last go round. And so I'm assuming in this case, it's just going to be February 15th through December 31st, where it was February 15th through June 30th. It's going to be February 15th through December 31st. So you're just going to have to do a little more work, or hopefully your payroll reports will give you what you need. Let's see. Go ahead.
Is it okay to change a part-time employee to a full-time employee if they were part-time during the application process? If so, can the PPP funds be used towards that additional full-time employee pay? Will it be forgiven?
Yes. So you can, if somebody went from part-time to full-time in the spirit of the PPP, that's like awesome, right? So as long as you're spending that money, at least 60% now in the 24 weeks, or 75% if you're using the 8 weeks on payroll, then that's good. And that person actually will help your FTE count when you're looking at the previous time period when they were part-time. So that's a great situation to be in. Let's see. So maybe an easy example of someone that, say, makes $160,000 a year paid biweekly would help visualize. Well, so if somebody's paid $160,000 as of right now, you're going to have to max them out at $100,000. The current 8-week time period, you have $15,385 that you can pay them. We're thinking that it will increase to $46,000 something for a 24-week time period, but we don't know exactly if that's what they mean by it. We're assuming that. So we'll see. I think, as we know, when the first CARES Act and PPP thing kicked off, we had FAQ, SBA new guidance, final new interim guidance, and all this other stuff. So I'm expecting, a lot more is going to come out. The great thing about this is now we have time. So you have time. If you had a problem spending that money and feeling like you were going to get full forgiveness, you have time to spend it and get full forgiveness and hopefully restore your FTEs by the end of the year. And if you can't, because of some of those exemption reasons, like you can't find talent to fill the roles, you can't, your business has not gotten to the pre-COVID business levels, you're going to have a lot of flexibility. The goal here is that the majority of companies get forgiven, 100%. That's really the goal. That's why they're doing this, to see as many companies that can get forgiveness as possible. I did see a question also that was submitted that I researched, and this was about the affiliate question. How do we look at the 500 employee count and the affiliates? And that went back and forth. in the legislation and in the SBA documentation. And basically, originally what they said was you could not have more than 500 people in the U.S. And so then there were some big companies that were big international companies that maybe had fewer than 500 in the U.S. that were applying for this. So they wanted to change that. And then they changed the guidelines to if you had no more than 500 total employees, international or U.S. But they did put in a safe harbor, and I saw that if you applied for a loan and you had more than 500 total, U.S. and non-U.S., but you applied for it prior to that date that the new language came in, and I think it was May 5th, but I'd have to get that date. If you applied before that time frame, you have a safe harbor that it's okay that you had more than 500 total global employees, but you're not allowed or not able to spend this money on employees outside the U.S. So they did make a change to that, a safe harbor for that. Assume that S-Corp dividends to an owner don't count as payroll, correct? That's correct. So I have some clients, and as of right now, there's a couple of small S-Corps out there that I've had questions asked to me that did not have the owner on payroll. The whole idea of an S-Corp is to put an owner on payroll to some level. And so they've really made it known that this has to be W-2 compensation. So if an S-Corp owner is just paying themselves dividends, that could be a challenge. I have not seen anything on how to get around that. Maybe there is. Talk to your, if you have a CPA accountant, they may have a good answer for you on that though. But I did see that had been addressed. If you're an S-Corp, it has to be W-2 wages. Can you repeat the answer to the question regarding including bonus payrolls? You can include bonus payrolls. You can include any regular compensation, bonuses, hazard pay, increases, as long as you don't go over that threshold of the annualized $100,000.
Hey, Lori, I think I saw a question from someone saying, how do you set up if you're going to pay hazard pay in the payroll system? And I think that's as simple as you setting up a different rate or earnings code if you wanted to, like a shift differential or anything else. You would just set it up as a code and you could select that to pay it. And that's how you would keep track of it in payroll.
Yeah, you could just set up a new earnings code. I think it's good to show that was hazard pay for multiple reasons. I know some companies that are paying hazard pay for people who are having to come in and put themselves in more, they're around an environment that maybe puts them a little bit more in jeopardy, so they're paying them hazard pay. That's easy for us. Just let your account manager know you want to set up a new earnings code, and we'll track it that way. There's also, and I think I mentioned this is interesting for us because as we've moved the majority of our team remote as of right now, you can, because of the federal emergency situation that we're in, if you feel the need to, and I know quite a few of our clients have done this, give your employees a certain amount of money to spend on internet expenses or getting a desk and chair for their home office, because you can only work at your kitchen table for so long, or your couch or your bed. So if you're wanting to give money to employees, now you're able to give them a tax-free amount to cover those costs. So it's not going to be a taxable earning. And it's, I don't know if there's a limit to the amount. That's a good CPA question for you. But you can do that, and it's right now because we're in a federal emergency type of situation that you can do that and not tax that money to them. So, an example was a company that had to give. They've got a huge workforce that's had to be sent home. It's a call center, and they had to give them a type of internet capability because a lot of them did not have internet to their homes, and so they gave them money to cover that cost. So that's kind of an interesting thing to add as well. We pay monthly, so the $100,000 limit divided by 12 exceeds $15,385 for 8 weeks. Well, right now they've really made it known that $15,385, that's a number that they have used as a cap. The question is going to be, if you're going to the 24 weeks instead of the 8 weeks, you may be able to increase that amount anyway. So I don't know if you would change that. And I know that depending on your pay rate, your pay frequency, that $100,000 8-week amount is different. But if you look at, you have to do a table in the application for forgiveness for anyone that makes over 100,000, and it is capped. You're supposed to cap that at 15,385. That will change with this new 24-week time period, though. Are new applicants able to apply for 24 weeks of full funding? That's a good question. Very, very good question that I don't know the answer to. So if you have not applied yet for this, that's a good, that's good to find out. Maybe they will issue some new guidance on that. But if you've not applied yet, you have until June 30th. So I would apply, and you may potentially get more 24 weeks. I don't know that's not the spirit of why they've done it, so they may not change that. But I do know that June 30th is the deadline as of right now to apply. Let's see. Did you see anything else, Scott? Barb, do you want to anything in the pre-release or the pre-submitted questions as I look through the rest of these? Oh, I have one real quick. And then you go. Do we have to make an actual selection on whether we are using 8 or 24 weeks, or is every company given the 24 weeks? Every company can have the 24 weeks. So you have the option. If you want to stick, there was language in the bill that said if you want to stick with the 8 weeks, you can. So you can stick with the 8 weeks and what the previous application requirements are. But everybody is available or is eligible to have the new 24 weeks.
I see a question that says a manager voluntarily reduced his or her hours, so we converted the salary to the equivalent hourly rate, and they're now working reduced hours due to their choice. Does this put me in violation of the salary reduction requirement?
No, it does not, because, well, you can answer the from an HR perspective, but if someone in the previous language, and in fact in the current application for forgiveness already, it states if you can reduce your FTE number required if someone either refuses to come back to work and you offer to rehire them, or they've requested reduced hours. So that was already in the current application for forgiveness. So just make sure in all of this that document everything. And Scott, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that's what I was going to say. That's a good answer. Just make sure you get something in writing from that person about that. Now, what you cannot do is violate wage and hour laws throughout this. So if someone says, hey, I'll work for free because I'm losing my mind at home and I want to come in and do something, you cannot let them do that. Employees don't even have the right to waive their own pay, which seems unusual, but sometimes people will do that just for sanity. Just let me come in and do something, even if you can't pay me. And you really can't do that. If they're doing work for you, you got to pay them something.
Yeah. Another thing is somebody explained, one of the previous questions was if they had to lay people off after the PPP funds have been spent, what will happen there? So I think this is going to happen, unfortunately, to some companies who rushed to spend the 8 weeks because they needed to. They were worried about the 8 weeks running out and not having the money spent. So they paid people, they brought people back on, paid them, and then they still didn't have enough business. So they've had to lay people off again, which is so unfortunate that this happened so late. I wish they could have gotten this done earlier. But the way I read this is you will still be eligible for forgiveness as long as you restore that FTE count by the end of the year. So you still have more time, build the business back up, revenue back up, get the FTE count back to where it needs to be, but you'll still have some ability to not have to hit your pre-COVID-19 numbers if you can prove that you were, your revenues have not come back to where they were by the end of the year. You couldn't hire people to fill roles that don't exist anymore and that type of thing. So I think you're going to have a lot of room. Even if you've spent it and had to lay people off, I think you'll have a lot of room to restore that And even if you can't fully restore it by the end of the year, you're going to have some room, wiggle room in there. So I guess we'll try to wrap this up. I just want to quickly say thank you, everybody, for, I read all the stuff yesterday and trying to make sure that, or over the last couple of days, and track to make sure that Senate passed it last night. I was so excited about that, so that we could talk about real stuff and not proposed. So it's all real. This is this is happening, and I hope that this has been valuable to you guys. We're going to continue to do these as long as there's value. We may change some of the content, but we really have enjoyed this, and we enjoy the questions that have been submitted ahead of time. If we didn't get to your question, because there were a lot of them, we're going to respond to them, and you will get them after this. And then just, lastly, the last thing that I want to say is just, if for some reason if you're not a current client of ours, you're not, getting the help that you're looking for from your current provider, just make sure to keep us in mind. We'd love to have a chance to at least talk to you about what we can do. We've just recently issued a new guarantee that's a little scary, but interesting nonetheless, which is every employee is paid right the first time, or you are refunded implementation fees. So we'd love to have a chance to talk to anybody that might want to talk to us. So with that, I'm going to say thank you so much, everybody. And Scott, anything else you want to add, or Barb?
No, we appreciate it. We're here for you. Let us know how we can help.
Yeah,
Yep.
we'd love to help you guys.
And we'll keep anything new that happens, we'll continue to get it out to you guys as soon as we have it. So thank you so much. Have a great day.